Right, I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber now to my French ultramarine and create a nice neutral grey. Now these two colours I use lots of. You'll find if you add burnt umber to French ultramarine that the two colours neutralise each other. And if you get it exactly right, you get a nice neutral grey, which is perfect for natural subjects such as the rocks. A bit more ultramarine, a bit more burnt umber. Make sure it's well mixed in. Just be careful, just watch out for unmixed pigment that floats around in your mix, because it'll play havoc with your wash when you put it on. We'll start painting in the rocks now. What I need to do is make sure I leave a few random highlights along the way. I'm going to start in the background where the big waterfall is. And as always, as before, I'm actually going to paint around the water. There we go. The water drops down there. These are the rocks. We'll leave a few highlights, particularly along the top edges of the rocks. Also in a few places, just here for instance, I'm going to just blend it into the grass. Because this hill is quite a way away from us, I don't want to clutter it up with too much detail. There we go. Again, I'm just using the slightly smaller brush there. It's a number 10 round, just to soften some of these rocks into the surroundings. I've got there's a big rock escarpment there, which at the moment is like a ghost. So we'll paint that in just to give it form. And it needs to be dark so that it can stand out against the light of the hill behind it. There we go. Okay, moving forward now, still using the same colour. Painting in these rocks and leaving a highlight along their top edge. There we've got where the water drops down there, we've got a rock. Nice big boulder there. Apply it to the boulder, but again leaving that little bit of a highlight just along its top edge. And I'm deliberately trying to keep it nice and loose and random. Finally, we reach the foreground rocks. Again, I'm leaving a few highlights, and the white of the paper, here, represents the water, which I'll be coming to and finishing off in a moment. But what I need to do is just a little bit of technical term here, a little bit of dubbing along the bottom edge. So where the water is breaking up. Again, we've got rocks here, a bit of a highlight just along the top edge. And a bit of daubing. I've just got these rocks here. Again, the highlight along the top edge. It helps to keep the definition. And while I've got that colour, I'm just going to build this up just a little bit more. I'm actually going to add a little bit more of both the French ultramarine and the burnt umber to the mix, just to darken them slightly. And I'm going to add just a tiny, tiny amount of alizarin crimson, just to warm it up. Really is only a tiny amount. And I want to add this particularly to the bottom edge of some of these rocks. This one in the foreground in particular. A little bit of negative painting here. If I paint into the grasses, It makes the grasses stand out. That's better. A little bit more just along the bottom edge here. The lighter grey is still damp, so it's quite, the lines that it's creating are quite soft. There might even be the odd little back run in there, which is fine. Back runs aren't always bad. They can help give a little bit of texture. These are rocks after all, so if we get a few little random textural things happening like back runs and dry brush, it's not a bad thing. There we go. Just run that along the bottom edge where the water is. I'm using the same colour. To be honest, we should try to recycle. I like to think of it as recycling. Recycle your colours. Use them. Don't just use them in one area of your painting. Have them reappear elsewhere. And just soften that. Always blending in. There. Now then, that's not looking so bad. I just want to darken this area here. I feel I want to just accentuate the depth a little bit. So if I introduce a darker element just there, it's going to help with the overall composition. There we go. We should always be on the lookout with your painting, always be on the lookout for contrast and instances where you've got light against dark. The whole of the painting is made up of light tones contrasting against dark tones. And in certain cases, we may need to even engineer it so that that happens. That's it. A little bit more of the dark tone along here. Again, I'm using the dark tone there just to introduce a little bit of variation. Where the rocks meet the water is where the contrast should be at its strongest, because that's where all the impact is going to be. So again, I'm just going to darken that. There are all sorts of rocks strewn around that area. I don't want to get involved with every tiny detail, just a few random little splodges will suffice. Okay, so those are my rocks, more or less established as I want them to be. I'm going to leave it to dry now for a short while, and then I can come back and put in the finishing touches to the rocks and the water, and of course that background hill. All right, it's time to start dealing with the water. Up until now, I've just left it as white paper. We need to put a little bit of detail in there just to show the direction of flow and to just give a suggestion of movement. Now, it's important not to overdo this. The more detail I put into the water, the less impact it's going to have. So we're looking for white water here. I'm taking some French ultramarine, a tiny bit of burnt umber, those two colours again, my favourite two colours. So I'm aiming for a nice blue-grey mix. I'm using a large worker here to mix my blue-grey. There we go, I'm reasonably happy with that. And all I need to do here is just put in a few lines, as I say, just to suggest the movement a little bit at the top of the waterfall there. And just soften that off with some clean water. Blend it in. really doesn't take much at all. And as I say, the fewer marks we put on it, the more impact it's going to have. Less is definitely more. Right, we've got a little bit of a waterfall there, so just a few little brush marks. That'll do. And then when the water, along here the water is flat, it's horizontal, so the brush marks should reflect that. The big waterfall at the back, again, just a few subtle little flicks of the brush. Just to suggest movement. Actually, I'm going to use my finger to just induce a little bit of dry brush to that. I'm going to stop with that because keep adding to it, and then, as I say, and we lose it. The more you put in there, the less impact the water is going to have. All I need to do now is take some, again, the French ultramarine and the burnt umber. I'm going to add a bit more of both colours to it, and a little bit of the alizarin crimson. Remember, that just adds a subtle warmth to it. I just want to add the finishing touches to the rocks and to the water. Now look, at the top of the water here, where it just drops down, if I put in a tiny drop of that dark tone, just blend that in. It accentuates the drop. It also suggests you can just see the rocks just beneath the surface of the water. A little bit in there, there we go. Okay. A few of those dark tones up the top there. Again, I'm just going to blend those in. And finally, just a few nice dark tones in the foreground rocks. Again, just to accentuate the shape. We need to break it down anyway. I mean, there's several surfaces at work here. And by adding those dark tones, it breaks it up into several different surfaces. That's better. A little bit in the foreground. These, again, the grasses that I've painted negatively, if I just work those darker tones into there, it just makes them stand out that little bit more. And the cracks and the rocks there. It's very tempting to just keep working at this and working at it and adding more and more details into the rocks. But the further away a rock is, the less detail we'll see on it. There we go. And we're nearly there. The thing, of course, I mustn't forget is that background hill. And for that, I'm just going to mix up a light French ultramarine. I'm just going to paint that in. Like so. I'm just going to run some clean water along its bottom edge. So there we have the finished painting of the waterfall. The whole impact of a waterfall comes from its contrast of light tones against dark. So it's imperative that you retain those highlights as you go along.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended DVD of today's workshop is now available from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.